Hey, what's up, guys? So I had the idea to make this video to discuss my growing up in the 1980s and now raising children in the current time and some of the differences that I've observed. So the main difference that I see is with regard to technology. So in the 1980s, we basically had almost nothing of what we have now. We had television. I didn't even have cable back then. We had channels 2 to 13. That was it. There were no cell phones. There was no internet. There were no little personal devices to occupy one's time. And basically, what that led to was that, for the most part, we occupied ourselves with being outdoors. We did things. We had to entertain ourselves. Generally speaking, for me and those around me, we go to school, we come home, and we drop our stuff off, and we're out. We go back out until dinner time or until it gets dark, whatever. This is from a young age. We were also taking ourselves back and forth to school from a very young age, walking or riding a bike or whatever. But we were allowed to be unsupervised. In utilizing our time in that way, we were basically out in the world. So we were actually learning about life. We were learning a lot through exposure alone to different circumstances, different stimuli, different environments, different people, whatever. That, I think, is a huge, huge thing that's lacking now. So in place of doing what we were doing, the kids now are, at least that I see around me, are basically stuck to the electronic devices. That's all they do. So their free time is completely revolving around, one or multiple different things, whether it be the computer, a laptop, iPhone, video games, social media, whatever it is. They are stuck to these things. That's a big problem. I feel that's a huge detriment. I also feel that the content that they're viewing and that they're occupying their time with is also a huge problem on a whole other level. So in addition, the fact that we were entrusted in the way that we were to take care of ourselves or to be among a group of other kids similar in age, allowed us to mature and develop, as I was saying before. These days, in contrast, the kids are not allowed to be alone, unsupervised. I have actually heard of a parent being arrested for allowing an 11-year-old child to be at the playground unsupervised. I've heard of another instance where a parent was also arrested for allowing like an 8-year-old child to walk to school. It was 1 block, and there was an issue with that. So we are not, as parents, allowed even to afford our children those freedoms that we were granted back then. These were crucial in developing a lot of who we are, our personality, attaining all kinds of different information that we were exposed to. So this is the main difference between now and then. Unfortunately, the result of all of the technology, in my opinion, is also that the kids don't know how to socialize. Okay? It's very difficult for young people to have conversations beyond 3 to 5 minutes, let's say. Their attention span in general is much, much lower. They're much more sensitive. They're much more sheltered than we were. As another example, back then, if there was a problem, among young people, we fought. There were actual fights. There were actual fist fights. We fight and shit happens and somebody wins, somebody loses, and we move on. Now, that's not allowed. It wasn't technically allowed back then, but it happened and everybody knew about it and we move on. Now that will result in arrests and lawsuits and being kicked out of school and basically destroying someone's life. I feel that that's a problem also. Basically, we were in some way allowed to defend ourselves, right? And to handle things in the way that we felt right. Whether it was right or wrong was irrelevant. Now what the kids and the young ones are being told to do is to never, ever handle things on your own. Never defend yourself. Never stand up for others. But always just tell. Go find an authoritative figure and tell. And have them be the resolution to your problem. The problem with that is later on in life, when these kids leave the school system and actually hit the real world, they're going to have a rude awakening when they realize that there's nobody there anymore now to hold your hand or for you to go complain to and cry to that's going to come in and, stop this person from hurting your feelings. That doesn't exist. It's not realistic. It's bullshit. So in efforts of sparing these kids' feelings from being hurt, you've created a bunch of fucking soft-ass people who cannot survive, who are not able to survive anymore. That has happened year after year in worse ways, as time progresses. And the result of it is what I think now clear, that we have a problem. We are really, really sensitive. Obviously, I'm excluding myself to that. I don't give a fuck. I speak freely. But we're at the point now where we actually cannot have dialogue. To some extent, dialogue is prohibited if it's deemed offensive. And I think that's a big, big problem. And I'm kind of, veering away from the original point of conversation, but going back to it, the 1980s versus now is a world of difference in how kids are raised and how kids are brought up. Ultimately, the technology, I feel, though very valuable when used correctly, ultimately, overall, I think is much, much more of a negative than a positive, especially to the younger people. For me, personally, I had 3 children, and I keep that stuff away from them. We are about having conversations. We are about learning and reading and understanding things and not just doing things because we're told to do them. We are not about conforming. We are non-conforming until things make sense to us. And when they make sense to us, we decide that we're going to comply. So, again, this video kind of touched a lot of different points, but I just had the idea to make it, and I wanted to, mention some of these things because there are a lot of big differences, and it's difficult to raise kids in this day and age. It really, really is, because even though I'm relatively young, I'm very far out from the current times. I'm way out of the loop. And what my children are experiencing and will continue to experience as they get older is very, very different than, what I went through. So basically, to sum up, those of us that grew up at that time, we are the last. It's a very special time because we are the last ones to have lived without all of that technology. We'll never go back to that. Unless, people are wiped out and they start all over again, it'll never be the same. And it was a beautiful thing. Not having cell phones everywhere and gadgets all over the place, it was a beautiful thing. And I miss those times. So I hope you guys enjoyed what I shared with you today, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks.